What is up, everyone? Back with another video on some Browns thoughts for this offseason coming up and what we should do, what the heck's going on, and kind of just a little bit of everything dealing with Browns related and some high level NFL information too. This video I wanted to talk about if the Browns should keep Odell, which is going to be a big topic, and obviously it's relatively quiet now. I think moving forward, you kind of start hearing some more rumors and sparks, especially once free agency really kicks off and we have the NFL draft going on. So I kind of want to give my thoughts on if the Browns should keep Odell for this upcoming 2021 season. Some few points I wanted to highlight. So I think that one point that we all noticed and saw when it came to Odell Beckham this season in relation to the Browns was that his production really wasn't there. It hasn't been since he's got here in Cleveland, relatively speaking to his Giant years. Um, this off season too, or this past season, I should say, he was okay. We kind of forced some plays with him for him to do well. Like we designed some plays around him, I should say, for him to either catch his receptions from Jarvis Landry, do those crosses, or have him just like the. I remember that Dallas game. A lot of those big explosive plays I feel like were designed specifically for Odell to kind of run that, which makes sense because when you have that talent of a player, you need to design plays for him to do well and succeed. But having said that, as a pure wideout, he and Baker just still haven't clicked yet, and I think that's kind of interesting. On top of that, it's kind of obvious, as we all know, to note that the Browns and Baker Mayfield seemed like they were really picking up stride after that injury, and literally the play after the injury, like the rest of the Bengals game where Baker just decided not to throw any completion the rest of the game. It's kind of interesting how that worked. But yeah, so I think that's kind of interesting to note that his production with the team hasn't been really there yet. The production without him kind of has been there. So it's kind of interesting from that standpoint to justify his contract for us to keep him when he is at least not yet impacting the Browns in that crazy of a way. I do want to keep in mind the counter argument to that is, and people always ignore this. I don't know why, but when you have a guy like that on the team, like he's drawing so much attention. Where indirectly, if you don't see that pure production, it helps the team out tremendously. This allows us to have not a loaded box on the defense against us when it's a design run play or a play action pass. So when Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt get the ball, there's one less guy in the box to worry about, and there's one less guy for zone blocking scheme to try to focus on in the block since Odell's drawing that attraction outside. And it's also a key note too. I thought all of our wide receivers, I credit to coaching a lot, especially Odell. I thought he was a really good blocker too for a run style offense, which I think is huge, and that's kind of an underrated feature with wide receivers since their job is to catch passes and make productive plays and go past the first down, score touchdowns, what have you. But the little stuff that people don't notice, like when they're designed run plays, you want to have your wide receivers make sure that they're actually adding to the value, contributing to what's going on the field. And when they make key blocks, they're locking down their guy. That's one less guy at least to worry about. So that's kind of a key point that people seem to not focus on with wide receivers, and I thought Odell did pretty well and has done pretty well with the Browns so far in that aspect. So the one argument, so like I mentioned, that we need a deep threat in the Browns moving forward. Even if we have Odell, I still think it would be nice to have a backup deep threat. And when I mean deep threat, I kind of think like Donovan People-Jones, how he had that big catch against Tennessee, where he went down the field, completely scored a touchdown. And we need guys that have that speed that can do that consistently. Now, Donovan People-Jones could be that option moving forward. We still don't have enough information on him yet to let him see if he could develop into that person. I still think it makes sense to have guys that could just zoom and say see and let Baker show off that arm, which I think is kind of underrated too. So with that in mind, I think we actually need a depth piece to have as a deep threat on top of Odell with his talent. So that's kind of the main. So the two main arguments I could think of for keeping him versus not keeping him come down to his cap space hit, how much money he's having, and how much that wide receiver group in general is going to have as a total cap space amount compared to the rest of the position groups. in this type of offense where a wide receiver is definitely not as important as certain other offenses, it just doesn't make sense in my mind that we're going to see the Browns keep this much money allocated to this position group, especially since Landry and Beckham are taking a good amount. I think you could argue that Landry can maybe restructure his contract to help the team, but no one's going to argue Landry needs to get off, get cut, get traded. It's pretty clear. I think that's the most uniform player the Browns fans are with keeping him and how valuable he's been to the team. That does, however, people need to realize that that does impact and hinder what we do with the rest of the guys. Obviously, Donovan Peoples-Jones is a cheap contract. He was a sixth-round pick, I believe, fifth or sixth, and with that money's nothing. So he's basically, essentially, relatively speaking, a free player to keep in the position group, which is awesome. Higgins comes a different talking point because he, depending on what he wants, he was making less than $1 million, I believe, this past season, and I think his value, according to, you could see all these online reports, they're saying he's worth anywhere from like $4 to $6 million annually. And while in general that's not that bad, but when you have two top-heavy wide receivers with those contracts, it will be hard to justify. Now, I'm not saying Higgins doesn't belong in the team, and I do think he does, and he clearly has a relationship with Baker Mayfield, especially on the field. It's hard to put that much money into one position group, especially when it's not that important, relatively speaking, to the other offensive groups. So with that much capital, so I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on moving forward. For one of the main reasons why Odell might get traded, not even just because of his production. I think it's just because of the cap hit and the cap space. I think that's another reason why Njoku, who I'm kind of was a fan of at the end of the season, and I was not a fan of him before. I thought he actually played really well. I believe if we cut him, we would save $6 million. So I could just see him being moved, either trade or cut, just solely due to the fact that saves us $6 million. And the Browns, especially with the lower, not that great of a cap space or for the team, whatever, in the NFL for this upcoming season due to everything going on, I think this could be a season where we kind of keep that tight with where we spend money on the players. You can kind of see players who are good, they add value, but they're not necessarily a necessity, to the team. That's where I could kind of see like players like Njoku getting cut, and you might see some guys on the defensive side that might fall in that category as well. Keep in mind, this is one interesting thing that I think to keep an eye on moving forward. If not this offseason, I think next offseason, I wouldn't be surprised if we cut Austin Hooper. I think his contract's a little bit high for his productive value. Harrison Bryant, I think, has a chance to develop pretty good, and I could see us riding with Harrison Bryant either this upcoming season or the following season, and drafting another Harrison Bryant equivalent. So that's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, with Odell and that cap space hit, I mean, if we could get a way to get a high draft pick and save that money, that might be very helpful to us. I think the Browns should try their best not to be in a position where we have to worry about if we have enough money to keep our players. We don't want to be in that position yet. That will happen, especially if we extend Baker. But we should not have any second thoughts as of right now. If, we can't re-sign Denzel Ward, we can't re-sign Wyatt Teller. Nick Chubb is a whole different story because I don't value running backs as much, but I do think we need to keep him, find a way with some fancy structured contract, but that'll be coming into question too, and I think that'll be more of a reason not to sign him from an analytical office if we just don't have that money available. So that's kind of where I see Odell being a potential trade or a trade target for getting rid of him. So not only because of his production and his chemistry, I think that's kind of a moot point. I think Baker actually kind of just stepped up because Odell got injured, I think personally, and I think that he just got more comfortable as the season went on, and that's when the bye week started to come into play as well, and I think that bye week helped a lot of players since we have not had an off season in that offense especially, so I think that's kind of why Baker and everyone else kind of stepped up a little bit after that. It just happened to be a coincidence when Odell went down. Now the counterpoint to getting rid of him and why I think it would make more sense to keep him, and that's probably my final position on this, is to keep him, is because who would we replace him with? Unless there's a specific plan in the draft where we draft somebody really high, I just don't see why it would make sense to get rid of that talent yet. Especially when we could kind of mess with numbers and we're not in that contract issue yet. I could see that being an issue next offseason, but And maybe after this season, that's a whole different story of keeping Odell. But for now, there's really no one to replace that talent on this team or anywhere for that matter. Free agency, if the only way to get even remotely close to his talent, or if you would say matches or exceeds, is when we spend that same amount of money that he's essentially making right now, if not 2-3 million less. Which at that point, who cares? I'd rather keep Odell. Um, and the draft too. I could see the draft being the number one way that we kind of maneuver around this. If we draft someone really high with a first round or second round pick, I just don't see that wide receiver talent there, though. I know it's a very top heavy wide receiver class. So in the later first round, and I also don't, I'm not really 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that there's not that justification of getting someone there, especially with our position needs right now. So I don't really see who the heck would replace him. You could make the argument, do we really need someone like that? And I would say yes. You guys are, anyone, not you guys, but anyone would be crazy to think that him, even if he's not playing well with Baker, and you could see that, make the argument that Baker needs had better chemistry with everyone else, whatever. But that Kansas City game in particular, and there was a few games towards the end of the season where our offense did not look as great as it did in the middle of the season and it did at the beginning of the season. And I think that just because teams loaded the freaking box against us. We had no deep threats at all. Obviously the Jets game is an asterisk because our whole wide receiver room was shot. But but that's kind of an example to the extreme of what happens when you have no deep threat. And people are like, why don't you run the ball? The broadcast kept saying that, and all the people in the insiders and all that stuff, they're all saying, oh, why didn't you run the ball? Well, you can't run the ball when your linemen are injured and you have the whole Jets defense within 10 yards, not even 10 yards, just loading the box against our guys. It just mathematically does not make sense to run the ball because there's more players right there against our players, so it just doesn't make sense. But that's why someone like Odell is kind of necessary, especially when we already have him. It keeps the defenses honest. I think in the Kansas City game, he would have opened up the game a little bit for our offense. I thought Baker played really well. I thought overall our offense was kind of okay, not great, not bad. And I think there's a chance if Odell was able to play in that game, let's say that he had a better chemistry with Baker, that our offense has a chance to be really great, especially against a defense like theirs where it's not that great. It's just good, if you want to even argue Kansas City's defense being good. So yeah, if we keep someone like that and we have the chance to go back in the playoffs and make it far, I think that's where you could see us taking that next step, is just having someone like that as a weapon to kind of keep that the respective team's defense we're playing against honest, and just have it be more of an open game. And I think if it's more an open game, I think the Browns would have a better shot at winning and going farther in the playoffs and potentially a Super Bowl. You never know. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Odell. So at the end of the day, I would say I think it would justify and make sense to keep him with our just the current situation we have at wide receiver and just everything going on. And then some reason he doesn't work out this upcoming season, we will trade him halfway for at that point probably be a third round pick if he's not working out, because that'd be a few seasons where he's not done that great. Or just cut him, unfortunately, at the end of the next coming season, have that cap space, have all that capital saved for other position groups. But at the end of the day, I think it would make sense to keep him for now and kind of ride with what we have and see how he fits with the offense, since we still really haven't got a chance to see that. But yeah, those are my thoughts on keeping Odell, and thanks for watching, everyone, and stay tuned for the next video. Thanks.